Well, folks, we're here for this week's culture segment, and I am here with Jordan Lee Dooley. You may know her. I mean, she's a speaker, she's an author, she's a blogger. She is the host of the podcast She with Jordan Lee Dooley. So many of you maybe know her from there. Also, as I mentioned, an author. She wrote Own Your Everyday, Overcome the Pressure to Prove and Show Up for What You Were Made to Do. But today we're going to talk about a new book, Embrace Your Almost. Find clarity and contentment in the in-betweens, not quites, and unknowns. And as I was saying to producer John prior to this, otherwise known as basically my entire life. So Jordan Lee Dooley, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Same. It's my entire life as well.
Okay. Well, very good. That's good to, strengthen numbers in that sense. So, well, obviously you have the word almost in the title. And so I kind of want to jump in and have you share, just so everyone can kind of get on the same page. When you're talking about almost, what kinds of things are you talking about? Because I think it can be easy for us to extrapolate of just like, well, let me tell you, kind of what I was joking about. My whole life is terrible. So what is actually considered an almost, and can you give a couple examples of where that's shown up in your own life?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the best way to boil down what I mean by almost is unmet expectations. Something that was supposed to have worked out a certain way, or that you thought was going to work out a certain way, or that you were even so close to having to work out a certain way, only for it to not work out, only for it to go sideways or get delayed or disrupted. And that can show up in a variety of different ways. In my own life, there's been some really, really hard ones and some ones that were just frustrating and disappointing, but maybe not devastating. So, for example, my husband and I, when we first got married, he was playing for the Steelers in the NFL, and we were 2 weeks away from our wedding and thought we were set for life. And then he got released right before we got married, and we were like, oh no, what are we going to do? And we thought that he would get right back on another team, but then he had an emergency appendicitis, and that caused a big disruption of his NFL pursuit and kind of eventually closed the door to that dream. And so, we expected something to work out one way, and it really looked like it was going to career-wise. And instead, it kind of got flipped upside down just when we thought that just right before the season started, right before everything was going to work out perfectly. So that was one, experience in our life that kind of threw us for a loop, and he had to figure out what he was going to do work-wise. And, of course, as a new wife, that affected me as well. And we were on that journey together. So that can happen in a career. Maybe it's in a different way. It may look like you almost got the promotion, or you were supposed to get the promotion, or you thought you'd get the promotion, and at the last minute it went to someone else. So sometimes it looks like that. Other times it looks like something really devastating. In our life, we were about to become parents multiple times, and just as it looked like everything was working out and our pregnancies were going, just fine, we would have unexpected losses out of nowhere. We've had multiple losses, and so those were traumatic and devastating almost, so there's some of those stories in the book as well. So they can be really, really hard and really, really, devastating, things like loss. And sometimes it's just frustrating, like, oh man, the dream of the career didn't work out, or I didn't get the position I thought I would get, or so-and-so, this and that, it didn't work out how I thought. So it's a range, of what it almost can look like, but they all boil down to, this is not how I expected my life to look.
Yeah. Well, it's so good that you mentioned that as well, because I think our first instinct when anything like that happens, whether it is, more catastrophic or just one of those everydays, didn't get it, whatever, is to think that either we did something wrong, like where did we fail? What did we, what wrong decision did we make? What wrong turn did we make? Or that we did something to displease God, and so he's going to hand slap us or worse, and he's not to be trusted. And I think it could really send us in a tailspin, which is a really difficult place to be. You actually use the book to say, and I kind of want you to go here a little bit before we get into some of the particulars. You talk about these kind of moments rather than just completely derailing us. And obviously there's a big spiritual component here to where are we putting our trust? What's our ultimate destination? But you talk about how these moments really can help us clarify what we value. Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, what I found in my own experience when various different dreams or expectations kind of got disrupted or went sideways, whether it was our journey to parenthood or a career not working out or unexpectedly selling our home or just these different stories that I included in the book, it was really interesting because in many of those experiences, they kind of force you to pause, right? Because when your life gets disrupted or your plan or your work or whatever it is that you're just like, chugging along, working on, when there's a big disruption or you get thrown off course, it kind of forces you to pause and kind of look around and reevaluate. And I know for me in various different almost or under expectations, I found myself doing that. I found myself saying, well, what do I need to focus on here? Or is this really something I want to be pursuing? Is it really something I value? And in the book, I open with this story to kind of illustrate the idea and the principle of what I'm trying to get across. I open with a story of when I was a high schooler and I was running track. I didn't really like track. I didn't really care to be good at track. I was just doing it because my friends were doing it and it was fun. Well, I was running a race that I didn't really want to be running because it was a tough race. And it was my first meet running this race. And I found myself in the last 100 meters of the race neck and neck for first place, which was shocking to me considering I had never done this before. And so as we were nearing the finish line, this image of Olympic runners that I had seen on television popped into my brain. And I had seen these Olympic runners go to lean over the finish line, trying to just finish, milliseconds before their opponent. So I decided to try that, although I had no experience with that tactic. And instead of leaning over the finish line to finish first, I actually face planted because my momentum carried me forward. And I ended up finishing dead last. I face planted on the track. All the runners blew past me, and I was laying there with skinned elbows and skinned knees. And the reason that's relevant to this conversation and this question you asked is because I think a lot of times some of the biggest disappointments or most frustrating things in our life, when we get laid flat out or we trip just, inches before the finish line or something doesn't work out, it's like, it's jarring, right? Like we're laid flat on our back. But it's like, I didn't actually really care to be number one on the track team. I didn't really need to win that race. It was just something I thought would be nice or would be impressive to my teammates or my school, but it didn't hold any like eternal weight. It wasn't something I really valued that much anyway or in the first place. And so that small experience can be reflective of so much in our life where I think sometimes we chase things that we want or we think we want or other people have told us we want. And then when they get disrupted or when they get thrown off course or it goes completely wrong, sometimes we take a step back and we realize, I don't even know if I actually really value this. For example, in the NFL experience where my husband's, NFL process didn't really work out, we realized, is it really the NFL that we really want, or is it the impact that doing something like that would allow us to have and the lifestyle and the flexibility and things like that? Like, we had to kind of reevaluate what is it that we're really after and why. Versus, in our parenthood journey, for example, we came to the realization that, no, that is something we truly value and we need to find the right ways to continue pursuing that. And so sometimes those things that throw you off course and really hurt and kind of burn in the moment do force you to pause. Otherwise, you wouldn't, because you just keep going. You just keep pursuing. You just keep doing, right?
Yeah.
And you slow down because life forces you to. Sometimes you do get that clarity of what you really value.
Yeah. Well, and I can see where, and again, we're talking mostly to younger adults here, that's who Boundless is. And a lot of folks who are making a lot of big life decisions now. And it can get to the point where some people are like, well, that's just why I don't want to make any goals, because I'm so afraid to move forward and do that face plant, exactly as you said, or have someone else tell me that I have to change course. So what does that look like for you? What's your advice to a young adult on how do you set goals and move forward confidently in them? And then how do you go about recalibrating if you need to?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. First, I think there's some really critical questions that's really important for young adults, but really anybody to ask themselves, especially in our world where we are constantly seeing everything that we could do. We're constantly being told or marketed to, whether that's on social media or any other medium of, content that we're consuming. We're always exposed to all the different things our friends are doing and all the possibilities and all the things maybe we should want to do. And it can get really confusing, and I think sometimes we arbitrarily set goals or think we want to do something or pursue something because we see someone else doing it and we haven't even really leaned into, God, is this what you have for me? Is this right for me? Is this aligned with what my season of life is? And I think that unfortunately when we're exposed to all of that, while there's good that can come from that, it can lead to a lot of confusion and a lot of arbitrary goal setting or a lot of arbitrary desires that don't actually align with what the Lord has for us. And so 3 questions that I try to always ask myself before I decide to pursue something or set a goal or anything like that is to ask, what do I really want? And what I mean by that is not, do I want a Mercedes or a beach house? Like, I think as Christians especially, we're afraid to ask the question of what do I want, because we've gotten so accustomed to thinking, well, what does God want? And, I think if you are seeking the Lord, like, your desires will look more and more like his desires for your life. And so asking yourself, like, what do I really want? Is really, if you translate that, what do I really value? What do I hope for my life to look like? What kind of impact do I want to have? And I think it can be helpful to think about this in like 3 to 5 year increments, because if you try to figure that out for your whole life, you're going to be really overwhelmed. And that's going to really, confuse you. So think about where you'd like to be 5 years from now. How would you like to be spending your days? Who would you like to be investing in? How would you like to spend your time? Where do you want your energy to go? Like, just try to picture like what you would like to be focused on and prioritizing over the next 5 years. Maybe for you, in the next 5 years, you want to get married, or you want to become a mom, or there's these things that are important values of yours. And while you may not be able to control the timing or the outcome, you can have a little bit of a vision of where you're headed, and just check in and make sure that's aligned with, what the Lord says. But I think we get so caught up in, God, what do you want me to do? And we sometimes forget that he leads not always from the front, but also from behind, allowing us options and just asking us to honor him in whatever those options look like. So anyway, I think first question is, what do I really want? Or in other words, what do I really value? Because there's a lot of things in the world telling us we should want to have it all and that we can't have it all. And I think that really confuses us. The second question is, why do I want that? Why do I value that? I think that's a really key question, because this key question, why, helps us differentiate between what's a goal or a desire that is aligned with what the Lord has for us and aligned with what we value, versus kind of arbitrary and maybe influenced by what we saw on social media, or what our friend or our sister or someone that we see is, online is doing. So what do I really value? Why do I value that? Or why do I want that? And then once you have a clear why, if your why is just, I don't know, it sounds cool, or it'll impress my friends, or et cetera, like, that's not a good reason. Versus if it's, well, I want to pursue this career goal because it'll allow me more flexibility for when I have a family one day, or something like that, that's an aligned, good reason to do something, right? It's bigger than just, it sounds good or it would be impressive.
Yeah.
The third question to follow up with is, how am I going to get there? How am I going to pursue it? Obviously, you may not be able to map out the perfect plan, just like with the race, the track story I told, where I had the perfect idea of how I was going to finish first, and instead I finished last. So there's a lot of variables you can't control, so that's not really the point of planning. It's more, okay, how do I take one step to get me 1% closer to that? What things are on my plate that are distracting from that direction I want to go? What is taking away from it? Maybe how can I make some adjustments to how I'm spending my time, or the places I'm spending my energy, the people I'm surrounding myself with, etc., in order to get myself closer to that goal, even if I can't necessarily map out every step of the way. So that's the 3 questions that I think are really key to ask yourself before you set any kind of goal, to make sure that the goals you do set are aligned and are arbitrary. That doesn't guarantee they're going to work out exactly how you thought, but you're going to feel a lot more peace and a lot more confidence pursuing them when you know these are the right goals for me.
Mm-hmm. And I think it actually reminds me of a reading I did this morning in Matthew, where, Jesus is pretty much alluding to the fact that, anyway, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, and I'm going to be handed over to the chief priests, and I'm going to ultimately die. And so let me let you in on this story. And Peter's like, no, that's not really my vision for you. So let me tell you what I think is going to happen. And Jesus has to say, because clearly Peter is... he's showing up in a way that the best thing that can happen is what's going to evidence power, what's going to make sense, what's going to keep us all comfortable. And then Jesus has to turn that on its ear. And so I think that's such a great application of this, in the sense of sometimes it's being faithful in small things and having goals that are like, what does it look like? I mean, because Jesus follows by saying, here's what you're going to do. You're going to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And no one wants to put that on their goal list. So I think that's just a helpful perspective to have. And to that point, Jordan, how do we determine the difference between like our mistakes and our missteps and just the things that we don't have control over? Like, how do we not keep repeating the same mistakes and just doggedly trying to achieve something or move in a direction that maybe God's saying, no, I probably have something for you over here? How do we recognize the signs of that?
Yeah, and that's what's tough because sometimes you can do all the right things and things can still go wrong. Like the
Hmm.
door can still close. You could still get an appendicitis right before an important camp that would have opened the door, like what happened in my husband's case with football. And so sometimes things really do just happen that are out of our control. And you know, unfortunately, I think sometimes we own those as our own failings. Like, oh, well, I wouldn't have eaten this thing, or if I wouldn't have gone to this event, or if I would have said. And it's like we can worry ourselves into a craze all day long. But I think when things continue to not work out, even when we try to pursue all the right steps, or if we, make a mistake and we learn from that mistake and we correct it, and it just doesn't seem to be working out, I think it can be hard to know, like, is it time to release this? Is this resistance that I'm coming up against a closed door and God's saying no? Or is it just a challenge? But because I think sometimes we expect the things that God has for us to be easy. Like, if God has it for us, like, it should just be easy to walk through this door. And that's not always the case. Sometimes there has to be a little bit of a journey, a little bit of endurance, a little bit of a mountain to climb. So that's what makes it so hard to determine. And I think what can be helpful is at the very least, seeking counsel, really leaning into those wise voices in your life, maybe mentors, maybe a pastor, maybe a close friend or your spouse, somebody who maybe is not so personally and emotionally involved in whatever it is that you're pursuing, be it a job, a family, or something else, and really ask them, like, hey, what are your thoughts? Because I'm starting to feel like I've just come up against so much resistance in this area of my life, but I also am not sure if it's time to give up or release it or let go. I don't know if God's asking me to, keep persevering or if he's asking me to quit. Like, I'm just so confused. And sometimes seeking counsel from a few people who are trusted, who know your heart, who are leading you, walking the same journey as you and point you to the Lord, but also have somewhat of an objective position on everything because they're not so personally impacted by your decisions or by your goals or by your achieving X, Y, or Z. That can be so helpful with clearing your head because I think we can be so emotionally and personally connected that it's so hard to differentiate fact from fiction and think objectively about what's going on. And so sometimes seeking counsel from those people that we trust, not everyone on the internet and their brother, but a couple of trusted people. I know there was a big decision I had to make when it came to a career move, and I was so unsure of what to do, but I just wasn't feeling peace on continuing, but I also didn't know if it was foolish to stop. And so I had to seek some counsel from trusted mentors and people who had walked a similar road before me and had been in business as a Christian. And they were able to kind of affirm some of the things I was sensing and give me some guidance on what to try next or what to do next. So that can really be, I think we forget the power of seeking counsel because we've been told and it's been, jammed down our throats online, like don't care about what other people think and set boundaries. And while all of that stuff is important, it's important to lean into what the right people think and the people that God has put in our lives as trusted, wise counsel, whether that's a parent or a friend or a mentor or a pastor or all of the above, leaning into those few people that can guide you and offer insight can be a really helpful thing. And I think the other thing is ask yourself, like, is what I'm doing or the efforts I'm making, like, is it aligned with God's word? And that can be really hard. And that's why seeking counsel can be helpful because someone, that you trust or has more experience or, can help you understand the word more, can help you kind of determine that. So I guess my biggest piece of advice is don't try to figure it out on your own. Go to God in prayer. Don't be afraid to seek counsel and don't feel like you have to make a decision overnight. I think so often we just want to know what to do. And sometimes God reveals it to us slowly over time. And I think we have to be patient with what he leads us to.
Yeah. Well, kind of in the last few minutes that we have here, Jordan, I'd love for you to address, this is something that you talk about also in the book. And again, the book is Embrace Your Almost, about disappointment. So in the midst of disappointment, you actually talk about and really encourage us to create sustainable rhythms and routines that are helpful, for not getting derailed, for not getting so discouraged, for not feeling like God has left us. What personally has worked for you?
Yeah, I really feel like when I'm in a place where I feel like I'm spiraling a little bit because life hasn't worked how I want or thought or hoped, you can really kind of get into this fog. And so it really helps me to take some active steps to really create, like you said, some rhythms. And for me, it really depends on what that is. But one thing we implemented practically in our life was to implement a weekly Sabbath because I don't know about you, but when I am frustrated with something in life or I'm facing a challenge or I don't like how something's going, I tend to try to busy myself, like subconsciously. I just start filling my life with distractions so I don't have to think about it. And I started to recognize that habit in myself. And so I realized that while being busy and, having some healthy distractions is not necessarily a bad thing because you can't just sit there and wallow all the time. It can also be an unhealthy thing because it doesn't allow you to rest or really address what you're dealing with or what you're experiencing. And so we implemented a weekly Sabbath where for 24 hours over the weekend, pretty much every week, we try to log off of our phones, log off social media, and just be present and do things in our real life where we're unavailable to the distractions or work or, the internet and all of the things that kind of take up our time and our mental capacity throughout the week. And instead we go for walks, we work on our garden, we read, we, watch our favorite movie, we make a big meal, we get together with friends for a game night. Like we just kind of detach and unplug from all of the work and distractions and busyness and try to really lean in and get present in our lives. And that always helps me reset, even when I'm walking through a season of disappointment or devastation or unmet expectations. Like it helps me kind of soak up real life, because I think when we're walking through disappointment or a season that doesn't look how we hoped, when we're constantly seeing what everyone else is experiencing and we're seeing their highlight reels, it only reminds us of what isn't going well in our life. It only makes us feel worse about that thing that we're disappointed about. So giving yourself like a rhythmic pause, a rhythmic break from a lot of that, especially if you're, someone who works from home or works online or works from your phone or anything like that. And I think most of us do, even if we have to go to an office nowadays. It can be hard to, constantly be plugged in. So that is one rhythm we implemented in our life, and we try to be as consistent with it as possible, and it makes such a big difference.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, obviously, there is more in the book, just a lot of encouragement, a lot of stories, folks, of how, as Jordan Lee Dooley has been telling us, really she and her husband have walked through a lot of this. And of course, even in elements of the public eye, things that have gone on there. So, folks, I want to remind you, the book is Embrace Your Almost, Find Clarity and Contentment in the In-Betweens, Not Quites, and Unknowns. And actually, this book, we would love to make available to you for a gift of any amount to Boundless. If you go to Boundless.org, just search for 760. That's this week's episode. And you give a gift, any amount, as we often say here on the show, whatever you want to give to help Boundless continue and provide comfort and encouragement and advice to those of you who are walking through young adulthood. And we will send Jordan's book in return. So go ahead and do that. So Jordan, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's been so much fun to chat with you, and I hope it's been encouraging.
All right. And then I'm going to do one more version for our radio folks. So here we go. Well, folks, we want to make the book available to you for a gift of any amount. Again, it is Embrace Your Almost. We've been talking with Jordan Lee Dooley. And if you go to boundless.org/radio, you can search for 760. You'll see the book cover there. Just click on it. Give a gift to Boundless for the work that we already do that you know you love. And we will send Jordan's book as a thank you to you for that. So, Jordan, thanks again for being part of the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Yay. All right.
Awesome. That was easy.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that. And again, thanks for hanging in there with us while we fixed the mics and the receiver and stuff like that.
No problem. I podcast. I know how it goes, so not a problem.
Super appreciate it. Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking of this as I actually just walked through one of my best friends gave a kidney to my sister in April, and it was one of those things that from start to finish, I tried to control the whole process and tell God exactly what this should look like. So a lot of growth and learning in that. So yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, I relate. I understand in different ways, but I hear you. Well, I appreciate your time, and thanks for sharing a little bit of your heart too. It's been really great to chat with you.
Absolutely. Well, stay in touch with us, and we'd love to do more in the future. So, yeah, we'll be, and John will get a hold of you when this actually airs. We're going to air it August 25th, and so he'll get you the links and all of that.
Okay, awesome. Sounds great. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks much. Have a great rest of your week.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.